Today's going to be our 5th video around shop organization, this one focusing primarily on sandpaper storage. I wanted to make a specific video on this because in my shop I had too small of an area dedicated to this, and because of that it overflowed into multiple different areas, whether it was extras that were non-used in one drawer, used pieces in a cabinet or a toolbox. They were all over the place. Because of how I had it set up, I had no room for growth. So I built it for what I had currently on hand, and as I expanded my selection, I had nowhere to put it. So when I designed this storage solution, I wanted to make sure that it was future-proof, that I had all the room I needed for growth, variety, selection of grit, all those things. So let's jump right in and I'll explain how and why I designed it the way that I did. Be sure to stay tuned till the end, and I'll make sure to go over things that I like and don't like about it, and things I might do differently if I designed it again. To start off, I'd like to explain how I came up with this design, so if you want to make something similar, you can understand the thought process that I used. The first step I always figure out for a project like this is going to be location. This will greatly impact how much room I have, which will determine how many of each type of sandpaper I can have in this space. I decided to use the wall space behind my miter saw. Because of this, I needed this section directly behind the saw to be fairly shallow, so the handle of the miter saw didn't hit it when in use. However, the rest of the storage could be a bit deeper. Next, I was going to figure out the different sizes and shapes of sandpaper I wanted to store. So I listed all the tools and different sizes I currently had, as well as the ones I thought I would use in the future. The last step was to figure out the variety of grits I wanted to have as options. I was planning on a range from 60 to 400. I started off by looking online for variety packs that had what I wanted. I found this to be the cheapest way to get a really good variety and quantity. From there, now that I have a lot of options, I'll see which ones I use the most, and then once I run low, I can buy a larger quantity of those, and likely a better quality, knowing that I'll actually use them. Once I found a good variety I was happy with, it was time to start designing the actual storage for this. After a few hours of going through the design and finding the best fit of moving things around so it all made sense, it's time to start the actual build now. Since sandpaper weighs next to nothing and I'm limited for space, I'll be using hardboard for the shelves since it's very thin. To cut the grooves for the smaller pieces, I used a table saw. When it came to the large pieces, I switched to using my miter saw. By setting the depth here and enabling the depth gauge, it allows me to stay consistent with the depth of the cut. I did have to make a deeper fence as the saw wouldn't clear out the very back of the groove in the bore when doing this. This required 2 passes for me since I only had a thin kerf blade available. This method did allow for a little bit of inconsistency in the width of the grooves, but I wasn't too worried about it since it's only a shop project. My drill press isn't large enough to reach the ones in the center, so I had to drill these by hand. Now we're good to start assembly. Because some of the pieces of sandpaper are going to sit back a little bit, I'm going to notch out the front of the shelves to make these easier to grab. On the ones that tend to push back a little far, I'm going to put a stop block behind as well, so that it doesn't get stuck back in the back part of the storage area. To do this, I used a few random cans in the shop to trace a half circle on the hardboard. I then used CA glue and activator to attach them all together in the area that I would be removing. That way, once they were cut off, the rest of the pieces would naturally separate. After sanding the cut smooth, they were ready to go. Time for a few coats of urethane, put these all together, and we can mount them on the wall using French cleats, and then get them stocked. To label these, I use Avery labels you can get at pretty much any office store. These won't stick long term to the edge of plywood normally, but since I added multiple layers of poly and sanded it smooth, they stick really well. So that's going to do it. Overall, I'm very happy how it turned out. It really allowed me to get a great variety of sandpaper for the different tools that I use and all the different sizes that I need, plus a lot of selection as far as grit goes. I also left enough space between each shelf to where when I had pieces that I had started to use or tore off a piece, I still had storage for that. The nice thing there is that it allows me to go back and reuse those pieces as before. I might misplace them or stick them up high somewhere in a toolbox, and I would never go back and use them, and I would just fly through sandpaper like crazy. Looking back, I may have gone overboard with the selection, shocker, but I really wanted to make sure that I included everything I think I might need so I knew whether I was going to use it or not. There'd be times where I would be using 120 grit and I'd be sanding for way too long when I could have just busted out 60 grit, got it down to where I needed it, and then just cleaned it up a little bit afterwards. So I wanted to have that variety just to play with it and see what I actually would use or not. The one nice thing is that if I do realize there's certain ones I never use or I use very rarely, I could always remove them and then double or even triple up on the ones that I do use just by removing one of the shelves and moving a label, and I don't have to rebuild anything for that, which is really nice. So that's gonna do it for this video. If you like what you saw or learned something new, be sure to like the video. If you're new here and you wanna see more stuff like this, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified when new videos come out. If you'd like to help support the channel, there'll be a link to my Patreon at the end of the video. To those already supporting the channel, I definitely appreciate your contributions. It means a lot. And a special call out to my gold members. Thank you so much for your help. I appreciate it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.